All right, man. Peace. So, Star Warriors power forward and woke athlete Draymond Green made an appearance at Harvard University where he decided to once again deliver his personal philosophy on the origin of words and how they relate to quote unquote slavery. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Well, before yesterday's Warriors-Celtics game, Draymond Green made an appearance at Harvard's Kennedy School and addressed his assertion from a couple of weeks ago that people should stop using the word owner in sports because it's reminiscent of slavery.
Oh, boy. Look, I can't stress enough to a lot of these pro-blacks and woke Negroes out here. The reason why people are taking you less and less seriously, and the reason why it's so easy to disrespect most of your sentiments, is because they're not based in anything of substance. It's purely based in your emotions, which tend to be purely based in delusion. Draymond Green says that the term owner comes from slavery. This is why I did the video a long time ago where I stated that black athletes period, should not be considered leaders, because they're not. Okay? When you were in school, when you were in high school, you had certain guys in school who were great athletes. You didn't go to them to ask historical questions. Okay? The reason why they're putting these athletes on a pedestal is because they're all controlled by the corporations. Draymond Green, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, these guys are all assets for Nike, corporate assets. So they're confederate in the quote-unquote equality propaganda, the equality agenda, which is really a code word for white man, please give me a hug. And the reason why Draymond Green is saying what he's saying, number one, is because he's ignorant. And I like Draymond. Right? When it comes to speaking about NBA-related topics, I like to hear what Draymond has to say, because for the most part, he speaks the truth. But when it comes to history, he's not equipped to speak on historical topics. He's not equipped to speak on the origin of words because he doesn't know. He wants people to feel sorry for him because he has embraced the slave narrative and the victimization narrative.
Green's comments previously drew a swift rebuke from Mark Cuban, owner of the Mavericks. Yesterday, Green doubled down.
So when you look at, the word owner, it really dates back to slavery.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. The term owner just means to possess something. Right? You can own a car, you can own an apartment, you can own a house. And yes, at one time you could own a person. Sure you could. But no, we cannot remove words out of our lexicon because certain connotations or certain definitions of those words are not appealing to our own emotions. No, sir. It doesn't work like that. Language doesn't work like that. We can't censor certain words that we don't like because, and this is something that I try to explain to a lot of pro-blacks and internet revolutionaries. But as I've stated incessantly, they believe that their own personal emotions should be enough to carry the day. When you stipulate things to others, you are tacitly acknowledging that those same terms should be stipulated to you. So if you want to tell people that they should not be referred to as owners, or you don't like when they use certain words, then you yourself have to understand that they are going to make those same demands of you. Now, we know that this is a nuanced conversation because words have different meanings and different applications based on demographics, based on certain races. There are certain names that you may be called by your friends or by your family, certain pet names that you're called by your family that you won't like somebody outside of your family to call you. And that's understandable. But at the same time, when you're trying to push or promote a certain personal opinion about words, you have to base it in some form of reality. You can't say that the term own or owner goes back to slavery. That is not true.
The word owner, master, it dates back to slavery. However,
no, master does not go back to slavery either. The term master just means to have a great or high understanding of something. Right? It can also mean to be dominant. Right? Like in Latin, you would have the term dominus or domini. It just means to be a master. You are a master of the household. You were known as the dominus. That's where we get the term dominate from. Right? When you dominate something, you take it over, you master it. Master does not go back to slavery. So once again, because a lot of these guys are so caught up in the slavery narrative and the victimization narrative, which springs from the slavery narrative, now they want to try to change history. And you can't do that, right? You should not be concerned with changing history and trying to take words out of dictionaries or take words out of the common everyday lexicon because you're so sensitive about what could potentially happen if somebody uses a word like that and applies it to you. What Draymond's really saying is that he doesn't want to have to refer to people like Joe Lacob as an owner because it makes him feel like a slave.
It was then, I mean, if you were a slave owner, in some sense, it was kind of your job. Like, you owned slaves, they did work for you, you sold whatever they picked cotton, you sold the cotton.
Well, being an owner really isn't a job, right? Running a business isn't a job. It's more of a venture. And when you go to work at a job in a corporation, you are considered a hireling or an indentured servant. Right? It's what they call today an employee. You have to show up at your job at a certain time. You have to go to lunch when they tell you. You have to do what they tell you, and you get compensated. And you do if you do work in somebody else's business or corporation, they are the owner, whether you like it or not. If Joe Lacob wakes up tomorrow and he decides that he wants to sell the Golden State Warriors, you have no say in that, Draymond. You know why? Because he owns the team. All right, you're an asset to the team. You're an employee. That's what you are. You don't have to like it, but it is what it is.
All right, Whitlock, what do you make of Draymond Green?
That Draymond Green is on that platform being interviewed because he's tall and can play basketball. They don't have him there because he aced all the poli-sci classes at Michigan State. Draymond Green beat up a dude at a bar. Draymond Green got busted for sending out penis shots.
Yeah, but that really has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. I understand where you're trying to go with it, that his track record shows that he makes bad decisions, but I don't think that really has anything to do with his diatribe at Harvard. I really believe that if you really want to address Draymond's sentiment, you have to address the woke angle and the emotional angle. But I mean, I guess you can make a correlation between his emotional attempts to make people feel how he feels about his misconstruing of the term owner with some of his bad decisions off the court, but I think that that's a stretch.
Shots. Draymond Green cost them an NBA Finals.
Yes, he did. I still don't believe that has anything to do with what he said at Harvard, though, brother.
Draymond Green's just out over his skis because I'm going to say, as a black person, there's a couple of words, I guess, that go from slavery. The N-word.
No, the N-word does not go from slavery. The term nigger, or whatever you want to call it, it goes way back to antiquity. All right, the term nigger has nothing to do with slavery. All the term nigger is another way of saying quote unquote black or quote unquote Negro. The term Negro actually is directly descended from the term nigger. And as most brothers know who read the scriptures, it's in the Bible in Acts 13th chapter in the first verse. All right. Now we pronounce that word that's in Acts 13:1 as Niger, because in the English we're taught that when you have a vowel and then you have a consonant after it, unless it's a double consonant, the vowel is long. So you pronounce it Niger, but in Latin, that word Niger is pronounced nigger. Because anybody who's ever taken Latin, you know that the vowels in our English language, A, E, I, O, U, are actually pronounced in Latin, A, E, U, A. So to make a long story short, in Latin, that term or that word, Niger, was pronounced nigger. In order to get the same pronunciation in English, they had to add the G. Okay? So, and then, of course, even before that, the words always come from the Chaldean or the Hebrew. All right, and I'm sure a lot of the Afrocentric brothers will come on here and talk about how it comes from the Kemetic language, so on and so forth. It is what it is. Point being is that the word has a great antiquity. It has nothing to do with coming from slavery.
And owner. The N-word is more offensive to me, and we seem to be in love with it, and no one objects to it.
Now, you see what Whitlock said. He said that two words come from slavery, the N-word and owner. No, owner does not come from slavery. So you're really in the same stead as Draymond Green, bro.
To it. I don't hear Draymond Green objecting to it. An owner was something my father was. He owned a bar.
Let me rewind this back a little bit just to get some of his words in context.
Couple of words, I guess, that go from slavery. The N-word and owner. The N-word is more offensive to me, and we seem to be in love with it, and no one objects to it. I don't hear Draymond Green objecting to it.
I'd have to ask Whitlock and Draymond Green, so what did you call somebody who actually possessed something before slavery? So there was no concept of ownership before slavery? Is that what you're trying to say? So if somebody actually had property in the form of land or a home or a house or an animal, there was no term for it. There was no concept of it until supposedly white people just start shipping millions of blacks over here across the Atlantic Ocean. At least that's how the narrative goes. That's when the term owner was created. No, sir.
An owner was something my father was. He owned a bar. I own a couple of pieces of property. Owner's not a bad word.
Agreed.
And, I just think we've gassed up so many athletes.
Agreed.
To think that they're all now spokesmen and intellectual thought leaders. And we're putting them on platforms and letting them talk to people because they can dunk a basketball.
You see, Chris X is getting amped up right now. Chris X is about to bring his black power fire.
Come on, they make a lot of money. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, but they don't need to know what they're talking about, bro. Once again, these athletes represent the interests of Nike. They could talk all the shit about how they don't like the term owner and right, but Nike owns you, dude. Nike owns you. They own your mind and your body. You just don't know it. It's like somebody who's under possession. They don't know that they're being manipulated. When Nike comes out and says, look, we're going to introduce the equality campaign and we want you to say this and say that and do this and do that, you do it. Because you believe that they're asking you to do these things in your best interest, and they're not. So there's more than one way to own somebody. There's more than one way to manipulate someone. You just have to understand the dynamics of the game. No, either you playing or you getting played.
And Draymond Green doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a guy that beat up a college kid in the bar and is on Snapchat doing stupid stuff. He's just out over his feet.
Yeah, I mean, he also used the word master. At Harvard, you can get a master's degree. Should we eliminate that word? I think...
Well, look, we already know. Draymond's just talking. He's a guy who likes to talk. We live in a social media age. Everybody thinks that their opinion is as relevant as everybody else's, no matter how informed or uninformed they are. So, of course, Draymond doesn't understand the idiosyncrasies of words and the various ways that they can be used and connotations and things of that nature. But this is a monster that the media created last year when they implored athletes to take on the role of Muhammad Ali, right? They created this monster.
I think we have to be mindful of things, but I do think we've reached a point now where there's over-analysis and paralysis of everything. We have an owner here, the Murdoch family. It's a corporation.
Exactly. It is a corporation. We live in a corporate world. If you don't like working for somebody else, then you should have your mind focused on owning your own business. That's why I constantly implore brothers to, try to focus on that. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But that's where your mind should be at, so that you don't have to be worried about subjecting yourself to the cult-like energy that you are indoctrinated with, that you're inundated with in these corporations. But everybody works for somebody unless you own your own business. All right? It doesn't mean that it harkens back to slavery and so on and so forth.
I don't know how NBA teams aren't they corporations?
Absolutely.
Corporations have owners. I own my home. Do you have to change the wording on a contract?
You own a liquor store.
Yes, I do.
You own several businesses.
Yeah.
We're just going too far.
I think that this is one of the unfortunate consequences or repercussions of when you have the descendants of slaves living together and coexisting with the descendants of slave owners. Because there are going to be little reminders.
Look, this is what I'm talking about with this bullshit. How do you know that you have the descendants of slaves living with the descendants of slave owners and you trying to make it a race issue? You don't know if the white person that you're standing next to is a descendant of slave owners. You don't know that. You're just talking. Once again, 95% of the Caucasians in America are the descendants of white trash. They did not come over here owning no damn body. Okay? No damn body. Most of these slave owners from the 1800s took their money and they became the owners of corporations today. Most of them. There are very few regular white people walking around who are the descendants of slave owners. And there are certain so-called blacks in America who are the descendants of slave owners, because you have black people who own slaves. And I've went over this numerous times already. Many so-called blacks came here from Europe. Not just the west coast of Africa, and many so-called blacks were already here. Right? These so-called Aboriginal blacks. So this is part of the problem that you have, not when you have the descendants of slaves living amongst the descendants of slave owners. This is the problem that you have when you have a mass of people who call themselves black and don't know their real history, don't know the dynamics of what actually occurred during that time period, and why they're being taught that they were all just slaves. The point of being taught that we're all just the descendants of slaves is to imbue a ruling class mentality in the descendants of the Caucasian. But Chris X doesn't understand that, because once again, he's another cat who's struggling with his complexion. And I constantly touch on this issue with a lot of the lighter so-called black people, and they're feeling their need to incessantly try to out-black everybody. Chris Broussard knows that if he was to take any other position other than the quote-unquote pro-black position, he would be accused of working for the quote-unquote other side. Look, and I have no problem with race-based conversation. I have no problem with the mentality of separation, but you have to do it according to information, not propaganda. And a lot of these guys, they're trying to push this black versus white thing, but they're doing it from the standpoint of the liberal black who really just wants to be validated by the Caucasian. You don't really want to own your own. You don't really want to have your own. You don't want to be self-defined. You want to run your mouth so that you can get the Caucasian to say, "I'm so sorry, let me give you a hug." And that shit is just not going to happen. It is just not going to happen. I don't care how much you complain and try to cause a scene and beg for attention.
Throughout society that rub one group the wrong way and not the other group. We see that with these monuments and these things that people are tearing down. I admit, as a black person, not every black person, not you, but when I hear LeBron James say my owner or another player say my owner, I have cringed.
Yeah.
And
you have cringed because, once again, you're hypersensitive, not to the history of America. You're hypersensitive to your own insecurities about, how light you are, bro. Let's be for real. Okay? That's really what it's about. When you talk about the term owner, and certain people will say, well, I prefer not to use the term owner because I want to use another term. Well, the actual owner has the right to say, well, if you don't feel like using that term, then I don't feel like having you employed with my organization. These athletes are employees, and they do operate from the perspective of an employee. Period. Now, what makes them different is that they are highly feted, they are highly venerated, and they're highly worshipped, and it makes them believe in their mind that they are of equal status as the person who runs the franchise. At the end of the day, unless it's negotiated into a contract and it's agreed to in a contract, the owner can get rid of an athlete who is just an asset whenever he wants. That is what's known as a corporate layout. It's just reality.
And it's been like, I get where you're coming from, but it's like, it just rubs me the wrong way. When I hear people refer to Dr. J being sold by the New Jersey Nets to the Philadelphia 76ers when the ABA and NBA merged, it doesn't sit well with me. Am I going to rally about it and say we can't use certain terminology? No. But those are little reminders that bother me as an African American.
I wonder if Chris Broussard has ever done any lineage research in regards to his own ancestry, and who his ancestors were, and if they were actually slaves. I wonder what he would do if he found out, or if he found certain revelations that brought to light that he wasn't the descendant of slaves, that he may have been the descendants of somebody else, not even necessarily a Caucasian European, but maybe a free black, maybe a slave-owning black. I wonder what he would say then, or if he would even bring that out. I'm sure that he would not. My point is this, brothers, don't get caught up in the narrative of so-called slavery, because even though it was heinous and it did occur, it was not committed to the extent that it's been reported in history. You should be more upset at the Caucasian elite for promoting a false narrative about slavery than slavery itself. Because we can't go back and change the past, but what we can do is we can alter and correct the rendition of history that is being given to us, that is affecting the modern generation today. Okay? So that's the main thing to be concerned with, is what we can do to correct things today, not to dwell on things that we've been told for a purpose.
And you hear it more in sports. You hear players referring to my owner. You hear his owner, the owner.
Right.
If the owner of Fox Networks or Fox Sports or any other company, they're the CEO, they're the owner of the corporation, I would never refer to him as my owner. But in sports, that happens.
Yeah.
And so I get where I got where Cuban was coming from too, although I think Draymond doesn't need to apologize. These are feelings that are legitimate for African American people, because it is a reminder of an ugly part of our history.
To his point,
No, it's a reminder of how much the version of history that is given to our people has affected their psyche. That's truly what it is. Because when an athlete says my coach or my owner, it's more of a reflection of the belief in sports. And as I've stated this already, sports is projected as a ritualistic form of the military. And what they constantly preach from the top to the bottom is that we're all in this together, even if, whether it's true or not. It's part of the imagery of sports and of a sports franchise, that everybody from the owner on down, they're all in this for the one common goal. And when you're working in a different corporation, no matter what it is, if you go in there and you're working as a maintenance man or you're working as a secretary, you're not going to say my owner, because you may not have even ever met the owner. All of these athletes at one time will and have met their owner. I guarantee you that they will see the owner. People are working in corporations all across America where they may never even see their owner, much less speak with their owner. But it's a much different dynamic between an athlete and an owner of a sports franchise than the average corporation in America. So somebody like Draymond, who I don't even know if he's ever worked a real job in his life, it's just interesting to hear him say the things that he's saying about ownership and what that term, how that term resonates with him.
Could I not argue on Broussard's behalf, you shouldn't have to apologize for emotions?
No.
I disagree with that. I think that there are all type of things that you should have to understand. You should be held accountable for, or responsible for. Right? You can get emotional, and you could launch a diatribe where you curse somebody out, or even put your hands on them. Of course, you're going to have to be held accountable for that. As an adult, you're held accountable for your emotions. You should have to, you should use discretion in what you say, and you should understand the scope of what you're saying and the context in which you're saying it. All right? Because just because you're emotional, you can't use that as an excuse, because somebody who's a listener can come back and say, well, you affected my emotions based off of what you said. Now, if you're going to be held accountable for it and you're not apologetic, then you also can't be worried about how people perceive you. That's the point. If you're going to be worried about how people perceive you, then you should be apologetic. If you're not concerned with perception, then you don't have to be apologetic. You just say, hey, it's going to be what it's going to be. You're going to feel how you feel. I said what I said. I think that the main thing is in any sentiment that you put forth, that is actually based in some form of rationale and logic. But it is what it is.
You can't be controlled by emotions. And that's one, again, and so sometimes if you're really in a fight and you're trying to fight for equality and improvement, emotions can't control you. Logic has to.
Thank you, sir.
Has to. Because the other side, they're not emotional. And so again, if there's
and if they are emotional, neither side will get anywhere. One or both sides have to be practicing some form of rationale or logic. in order to move forward and get somewhere. If one or both sides are purely emotional, there will never be any traction.
The word from slavery that we're going to be really offended about, it should be the N-word, in my view.
I'm not worried about that word. The reason why so-called blacks are overly offended by the so-called N-word is because they've allowed the Caucasian to be empowered by the use of that word. They have allowed the Caucasian to drape that word in a feeling of supremacy and the ability to use it on so-called blacks to make them feel less than. Most Caucasians don't even know what the word nigga means. All the word nigga means is black. Now you have people who have made up definitions for the word and made up connotations for the word, that it means lazy and stupid and shiftless and all this nonsense. These are connotative definitions that blacks have made up for the word to try to shame Caucasians into not using it. And all the word has ever meant is a so-called black man. That's all. So you have both parties, once again, who are uneducated or miseducated about the use of these words, and they have given these terms and these words more power than they deserve. All right. But oftentimes words are like trees that grow. They have connotative understandings, and that's why even like back in the day, like back in the 90s, and if you were a so-called black man, you talk to another so-called black man, you say, "Yo, what's up, black? Yo, what's up, my nigga? How you doing? You good?" You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how words, they grow, and they have sub meanings and sub levels, and you cannot allow somebody to shame you over a word. Now, once again, as I've stated in the past in regards to the word nigga, there's no such thing as a bad word. There's just words that are used badly, in a bad way. There are words that are used with the intent of trying to bring forth negative energy or negative response. If a Caucasian person comes over you and says, "Nigger, fuck you," now you know that they're ready to fight, so you should be ready to fight. Okay? If somebody says something to you in a way to let you know that they are taking an aggressive tone, then you have to be ready to take your respect. That's a part of life. But to be shamed out of the use of a word that is totally removed from language, that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. All right. And we have to deal in the real world to resolve issues and resolve problems.
And so that's where, when I hear, and again, it's like my father owned a bar. None of his employees, Chris is right, none of them said, "Hey, that's my owner." They said, "That's my boss."
Hey, and you know what? The term boss, if you're going to get offended by the term owner, the term boss is not any better. The term boss comes from an old English word or Dutch word. And most of you brothers already know this already. English and Dutch and German and Old Norse, they all come from the same language branch. And the word boss or ba'as, it just means master. That's what it means. Right? It's directly related to the word uncle, which also implied master. Okay? So, when people get caught up in using words, you try to run from one word to another, you end up with the same sentiment.
Boss, right. And so I get that. But it doesn't, when I hear these athletes, I hear it in the context of that guy owns the team. It doesn't remind me anything about slavery. But the N-word certainly does, because that word was used to dehumanize us.
Exactly.
And so we could be treated like cattle or property and things like that.
The N-word became a word whose connotation changed in the early to mid 1800s as a way to speak about so-called blacks like they were cattle. But no, that's not the original meaning or understanding on the word. It's just a word that was equivalent to the term Negro or black. All those terms mean the same thing.
And as black people, we have virtually no outrage about the N-word being pervasive throughout the society.
Well, the reason for it is because black people, so-called black people, subconsciously understand that the word nigger goes back to antiquity. A lot of times people ask about why blacks love saying the word or using the word nigger so much. It's obviously because it was a word that was used amongst our people going all the way back to antiquity. It's not a word that they learned from the Caucasian. If you want to understand history, there are many people in antiquity who had that surname of nigger, and that's how you know that they were so-called black. All right, but that's another issue for another day. That's another video for another day. Point being is that the term nigger was not invented during slavery. I mean, it's just silly. People don't understand the etymology of words or the meaning of words, and they try to associate their own emotion to it. So Whitlock did with the word nigga exactly what Draymond Green did to the word owner.
Well, that's when it's used by black. Now I'm with you. I don't like anybody using the N-word, but blacks do get upset when it's used by whites.
No, I get it.
There is.
Yes, because there's a connotative difference in the use of the word. To be honest with you, I'm more annoyed when I hear so-called black people calling white people nigga with an A at the end and allowing them to use it back. That's more annoying if you want to go there. But I don't get irate about anything because I just know how to remove myself from certain environments that are based on simplicity.
There is a difference when it's used by, again, I don't agree with blacks.
Right.
Well, it's like if I call my wife baby,
I get it.
I can call her that in the context. He can't call my wife baby.
I get it.
You see what I'm saying?
Can I call her baby?
No, you get knocked out.
But as a guy who...
Hey, McIntyre better be careful.
As a guy who owned a website, I ran it. We had 8 or 9 employees. It's since been sold, but none of the guys said my owner in reference to me. This isn't going to be popular.
Because once again, there's a difference between a conventional corporate environment and a sports environment. Now, I will say this. The modern day sports world is really an offshoot of a lot of the entertainment that they had during the mid 1800s, where they would have slaves, or what they call black bucks, engage in entertainment for other Caucasians. And they actually would go on tour, very similar to professional sports teams today, where they would go around the South and white people would come and they would watch as black males competed against each other in whatever it was, oftentimes fights, sometimes to the death. All right. So there is an association with the sports world with certain events that were held during the time of so-called slavery, and that trickled down to today in regards to the use of that term. But in the modern day sense, the owner and the athlete are intrinsically linked based off of the sentiment that we're all in this together. We're all here to conquer and to win. So, I mean, there are multiple aspects, that can be investigated on it. But the term owner in and of itself is not racial. It's not race-based.
To be popular, I'm going to give Draymond Green a small pass here, and here's why. These guys have a microphone in front of them at the shoot-around, before the game, after the game. He popped off, and I felt like this was an opportunity at Harvard to kind of back away and say, hey, I misspoke. But he's a proud man. You know that. He's one of the best trash talkers in the league. Draymond Green is not going to back off what he knows is a bit of a misspeak on his part. I thought this was his chance to really
You think he knows? I don't think he knows. I think when he initially said it, it was kind of a throwaway. You know what? As I think about it, we should get rid of that word. I think it was that type of thing. Thinking.
No, I think that a lot of his mother came out and he just started talking and talking and talking. And a lot of times people just start talking and talking and talking, and they talk themselves into some bullshit, and they can't take back what they said. So like McIntyre stated, he can't come back and say, oh, well, I really don't think that owner is an allusion to a racial dynamic. So he got to keep it going. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, the main thing that people have to have is an understanding of the proper usage of words and how you can't always try to associate terms and words with slavery to justify an emotional understanding or lack thereof on a concept.
Thinking out loud. And again, I think he feels like I do. That when I hear this,
doesn't
it bothers
own
me.
him, Chris.
No, but you hear a lot of times. I get it. I'm not saying it's an offensive word. I'm just saying, as an African American,
you have a right to credit.
Yeah, it does bother you a little when you hear it. Like a lot of
No, like I've stated, it bothers you based off of what you were taught in school about slavery, and about racial dynamics. That's what really bothers you. The words don't really bother people. Everything is framed according to what they've been taught or mistaught.
And again, James Dolan has a slave master's mentality. I'm just sorry. Draymond, if he couldn't shoot a basketball and was 6 foot tall, he wouldn't be at Harvard.
But we can say the same thing about Muhammad Ali. He was speaking at Harvard.
Let me argue this though. You could say a lot. You could say that often about a lot of people. If they didn't have this skill, they wouldn't be here. But
no, it's like an actor. And I get tired when I hear actors and actresses think that they can solve the world's problems.
Because they have good cheekbones.
Yeah, because they speak well in front of a camera. It's stupid. And Draymond Green is stupid. Coming up.
Come on now.
Before they...
Yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch. I wouldn't call Draymond stupid. Sometimes he says silly things, but, you know, he is an athlete. We're living in a woke era. People are encouraged to say how they feel about every little thing. And people are going to overstep their bounds. As I've already stated, these athletes were activated after Ali's death. And, you know, they're a monster that the liberal sports media has created. Now they have to deal with them. But these woke athletes also have to be careful, be very, very careful, to make sure that they don't speak beyond their worth. The main reason why Draymond knows he can speak how he speaks is because he knows what he's worth to the Golden State Warriors. So at the end of the day, we always come back to the convention of being an asset and being a corporate asset. All right. But anyway, I'm sure that this situation will develop in some way, shape, or form. Peace.